Last time we looked at the prologue, 3 issues, and 2 tines of Age of Ultron. So far, this event has not been impressing me at all. Ironically, the only story in all of that I actually felt was worthy of real praise was a tie-in that is not included in the collected series. Some might say that my largest criticism, story decompression, is simply part of the game when you are writing for the trades, to which I say, then it's a bad game you're playing. At every moment, you should be accomplishing something. If you are not, what is the point? You have to ask yourself, why is this in my book? It has to be because it makes it better. It doesn't have to be action. It doesn't have to be dialogue. It doesn't have to be thoughts. It just has to be something. Repeatedly showing me the same damn thing, or more of it, is an ineffectual way to establish mood, tone, or style, and instead is just a lazy way to fill up pages. Shot after shot of the end of the world can do any of those things. Yet this isn't. Age of Ultron is not a comic, it's a travelogue of demolished buildings. So let's get to issue 4, where Luke Cage has brought an unconscious She-Hulk to Ultron to pretend to trade her for protection, when he's really here just to get information. What he's found is that Vision is Ultron's puppet, but the puppet is able to resist the strings slightly. Vision manages to get out that Ultron is, in fact, controlling things from the future, that he's not even here in this time, and yet is still controlling events. The information is too briefly offered before he's back under Ultron's control, so She-Hulk decides the jig is up, and throws Cage through the wall to escape while she faces a fight that she knows she can't win. And sure enough, she doesn't. Of course, it's a long way down, and Cage has to fight Ultrons along the way, taking up a substantial portion of the book, until there's a massive detonation that rocks what's left of the city. We cut away to Moon Knight and Black Widow in San Francisco, where Widow has managed to get into Fury's black box for end-of-the-world scenarios. Seems he's got a plan in place for this particular problem. It entails going to a safe house in the Savage Land, which coincidentally is where Captain America wanted them all to rendezvous. A rather long coincidence, actually. I mean, yeah, if you worked at it, you can come up with an argument. Oh, Cap knew about this scenario. That's why he said to rendezvous there. But if that were so, why was he just sitting around with his thumb up his ass this whole time, trying to think of a plan, when he knew that there actually was a plan, and it required going to the Savage Land? There was ample opportunity to justify this, rather than just have it happen that of the whole damn planet, they just happened to pick the right place to fall back to. Like I said, the story is hardly so damn packed that there's no room to slip it in there, was there? They arrive after Cage has. He survived the nuclear blast, but barely, just long enough to get to the Savage Land and tell them what's going on before he dies. And Widow and Moon Knight show up, along with Red Hulk, who murdered Taskmaster because I guess he had it coming. Anyway, with Fury's plan, they figure they finally have a way to deal with Ultron, but to be continued. Brace yourself as I give an issue of the main book some praise, and here it is. It feels like a complete issue. It's nothing especially great, but at least it feels like it's got stuff inside of it. It's got some fight scenes, of course, but mostly this is a chapter to move pieces around to set up the next stage, which is funny because very little was accomplished having the pieces in their starting location during issues 1 to 3, right? When I was reading this, I had no idea who either Red Hulk or the Taskmaster were, and it seemed really harsh that Red Hulk just flat out murdered the guy. I gotta tell you, speaking as someone who was representing those new readers, which must surely exist if we were willing to break the Marvel Universe to try to get them, I have no idea why one person would kill another person who's on his own team. Seems like that kind of thing should be explained, huh? The next issue is one of those things that continues to make me shake my head. Ultron number 1. The title suggests that this might, perhaps, be the point in the story of the invasion where we would, I don't know, see the character whose name is all over the event. If we have not seen Ultron, during the Age of Ultron, when Ultron is the most important figure, Ultron who is pulling the strings, and Ultron's name is on the title of this book. Surely this must be something to do with what Ultron is getting up to, right? Of fucking course it isn't. Now, see, it's called Ultron #1 because if they actually called it Runaways tie-in of Age of Ultron, that's not going to sell as well, is it? As established, the series seems to be most banking on making its money by confusing people. So hey, why break with a winning formula? Anyway, if like me, you know bugger all about Runaways, which again makes me representative of Marvel's new target audience, then you're banking solely on the limited introduction that we have here. The Runaways was a team of teen superheroes whose parents were villains, so those kids seek to do some good. Victor is the creation of Ultron, and thus is the android's son in a loose definition of the term. I've read this issue twice, and honestly, I still don't give a shit about it or about Victor. It's basically him rescuing kids during the apocalypse. They discover what he is, freak out, and then they die. And then he fights some Ultron forces. If you are into Runaways or Victor, I'm sure it was a blast. But teens are frequently insufferable in fiction, and this is no exception. It's probably this was to set up Victor's future role in Avengers AI, a new series that was going to begin once Age of Ultron was done. But since that series got shit-canned after only 1 year, that's even less of a reason for me to care about it. You know, before I go any further, I should mention, by the way, that I've got a series over on the other channel called Incredible, where I take a look at the history of the Hulk in comic books. I've also got a series that's going to be coming out soon called From Here to Infinity, which takes a look at events related to cosmic stuff in the Marvel Universe. Thanos, the Infinity Gems, the original Captain Marvel, Warlock, and the like. I mention that because what I want you to understand is I am being sincere in what I'm telling you here. I didn't come here to bash Age of Ultron. I came to read Age of Ultron and tell you what I think. The fact that in so many cases I am thoroughly, incredibly disappointed with it is not a reflection on me. I didn't write the terrible issue. I just work here. And as always, I'm not claiming to be the arbiter of what is good and what is bad. If I say something's bad, I'm going to try explaining why I think that's the case. Well, that doesn't make me right. At the same time, though, please don't treat my viewpoint as someone else who just says, Brian Michael Bendis has his bald head shoved up his ass. I try to bring a bit more to the show than that. So anyway, with that out of the way, let's move on to Age of Ultron #5. This begins with the recovery of the Vision in the recent past. Recovered after he had been killed by being ripped in half. Happens more often than you think. Stark, Reed Richards, and Hank Pym discuss this along with the idea that traveling back in time and telling Pym not to make the original Ultron would have been a good thing, but that would mean that Vision would never be created, which was a good result of this evil coming into existence. Although in the present day, with humanity facing extinction, there's probably room to argue more harm than good came from that. After a bit of searching, they find Fury's secret lair, along with Fury himself, after a misunderstanding like these things usually require, naturally. There's a short interruption as we see the whole world hasn't actually been wiped out yet. Ultron is powerful but not truly ubiquitous yet. His forces are only now arriving to attack Austin, Texas, ready to challenge their assertion as live music capital of the world. But back in Furyland, he has a plan to deal with Ultron using Dr. Doom's time travel device. Once we've used that to get to the future, we've got an elaborate plan, which is kill him! Kill him in the face! Iron Man's not loving this plan, including the fact that Ultron may have orchestrated this, or he may have learned of it and adapted because of Cage and She-Hulk. Either way, this sounds like a trap. So Wolverine has a counterproposal. Forget the future. Go with the past. Deal with the guy who's responsible for Ultron. You know, like the Terminator in reverse. Instead of causing the robot apocalypse, we'll avert the robot apocalypse. Everyone else is of the view that just talking to Hank Pym would probably be enough. Just tell him not to do this, but Wolverine is not hearing it. With great power may come great responsibility, but with great intellect comes great ego. Telling Pym not to make Ultron because it will destroy the world will not work, he says. For a normal person it would be, I better not chance doing this terrible thing. But if you tell someone like Pym, he'd say, oh, I better not chance doing this terrible thing by doing it wrong, because I've got to save the world by doing the awesome job I know I can. Wolverine is completely convinced that you can't convince Pym to do anything else. He's incapable of doing anything else. Pym would feel compelled all the more to do it just to prove to himself that he could do it right. So after Fury leads his group into the future, Wolverine insists he's heading into the past to solve things his way. By now the series has reached a point where I'm not at least completely disappointed with it. This is almost exclusively a talky issue, and short on character too, but this makes up for it by being intellectually stimulating, reflecting on past and future, considering alternate possibilities, and showing us the ongoing war against humanity, although that is sadly just more of the same. I continue to feel frustrated that the most interesting part of this is the part most glossed over, save only in tie-in works. But at least there's a sense the story is moving forward finally. There's a key thing to note. My frustration with the first part with the heroes in action was a mirror of the story's inaction. Their doing nothing didn't make me feel their sense of helplessness or hopelessness. It made me wonder why I was wasting my time on a book where nothing happens. At least something happening is, well, something. And there are a couple nice moments, like Iron Man's delight at Fury having his Mark II armor here, apparently given to Fury when Tony was too drunk to recall doing so. Issue 5 closes out the first half, and is sadly the first book that felt like it was worth reading. The next book is a tie-in, Wolverine and the X-Men number 27, again with an AU to distinguish it, because regular number 27 has nothing to do with this and involves a shark girl or something. Let me reiterate how annoying it is to make something so clearly confusing for new readers when Marvel will do terrible things to try to get new readers. It's rather like declaring a bridge to be off limits to foot traffic, even though the gaps in the planks mean that no one will ever ride a bicycle across it. What's wrong with you? This is also a problem. The events of this issue occurred during the events of issue number 6. The comic even says to read that issue first. However, all this really spoils is that Sue Richards wound up ditching Fury's team and teamed up with Wolverine for his trip into the past. So let's go forward knowing that. The two are heading off in a flying car because this is the Marvel Universe, and Sue keeps reminding Wolverine of the butterfly effect. Try not to screw up history and make Hitler president or whatever. Their battery runs out though, so they head to a nearby S.H.I.E.L.D. black site to get another one, and also some intel on where Pym might be right now. Only Logan spots a pitiful creature inside of a cylinder that's pleading to be saved from this laboratory. Instinct, as someone who's been experimented on by the government, kicks in, and Logan releases it, only to discover this is the Brood. That's a major screw-up as far as not messing with history goes. While he tries to clean up his mess, Sue learns that the site is spying on their past selves. In a nice touch, the cameras show old Kirby and Buscema images of the FF and Avengers, in keeping with the time period. She watches this footage, remembering key times from her own past, and remembering the other 3 members of the team who fell. This issue does a great job of forcing both Sue and Logan to rethink their hardline positions. He was all, she's too soft, we have to do the hard thing with the stakes this high. And she was, we can't just kill him and we can't shake up the time stream. Now he's the one thinking how important it is to mitigate their actions, and her thinking that they must succeed no matter what it costs them. It makes a strong impression with its strength of character and fun art trick, showing once again that the tie-ins are doing a better job than the main book. That brings us to the final issue for this video, Age of Ultron number 6. But first, I'll fill you in just in case you don't know the details of Ultron's origin. The character actually appeared way back in the Roy Thomas penned Avengers number 54, seemingly a robot puppet of the true villain, but soon we learned that the robot Ultron really was calling the shots. It wasn't until after dealing with Vision and the android's wish to aid the Avengers that we slowly learned about where Ultron came from as they visit Hank Pym's house only to see it's boarded up, and Pym has no memory of how it happened. The last thing he remembered was working on Dragon Man, back even further in Avengers number 41, but thanks to some super science, the mental blocks come down. After the stuff with Dragon Man was over, he rebuilt the equipment that had been destroyed in that fight and used it to construct a robot of his own based upon what he'd learned. And that prototype was Ultron. But the mind evolved faster than anticipated, and before Ultron was even switched on, was so powerful in its mind that it overwhelmed Pym and made him forget everything and abandon his own house. And eventually, Ultron started working to build more improved versions of himself, which got the whole ball rolling. Alright, so let's get to Age of Ultron number 6. Logan is headed back in time and Sue snuck away from her group and onto his trip to hopefully try to keep him from going off the rails here. During their discussion of the morality of this thing, Nick Fury of the past arrives in his flying car, which you obviously can guess Wolverine and Sue are about to steal, which leaves the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. no doubt confused as to how he can be carjacked in the middle of the Savage Land. They arrive in New York, where Pym is looking over Dragon Man and making notes, thinking of the potential of a better AI, one more advanced than us in order to make our species better. Logan realizes that he's arrived too late. Pym is already determined to do this and won't be persuaded otherwise. So soon it's Wolverine versus Giant Man, while in the future the team gets boned. They arrive to see the entire eastern seaboard has been converted into some futurized Ultron construct, and then are attacked and wiped out. So, back to the fight. Both are the best at what they do, it's just that Giant Man is the best at making world-destroying robots, and Wolverine is the best at killing people. So in a fight, that means Wolverine wins. But Sue stops him from delivering the killing blow, so that Wolverine has to remind her what's at stake, both personally and globally. If they don't do this, then they're all going to get wiped out in the end. Pym will not be persuaded. He's already made up his mind. So she lets Wolverine finish the job, and they leave, convinced that at least the world will be better off compared to what it was. This chapter continues the overall improvement of the story, now supplementing the ideas with action. And I'm not referring to action in the sense of fighting and blowing things up. I mean doing something. It's no longer discussing what we might do. Now we're actually going to do something and discussing possibilities and exploring concepts along the way, considering what could be. I am, though, seriously disappointed with the trip to the future, which still ensures that Ultron does not appear in his own series. And everyone is apparently overcome because he's turned the future into French fries, I guess. The heroes show up, learn nothing, and die, which makes the trip back into the past the only solution now, so it serves a purpose. But ultimately, the trip to the future is a letdown. What is all of this? What is Ultron doing now? Now that he's taken over the world, what's the next step? I assume he's planning to continue this elsewhere. Is that what is going to happen? I don't know. The trip to the future tells me jack and shit, and we will never ever find out. This series continues to frustrate me, though at least this part showed a marked overall improvement. Much like the Age of Apocalypse, time travel is going to ultimately prove the only solution to the problem, but that's where the similarity ends. The series' main book is rudderless, filling out pages but not fully satisfying, raising basic questions due to their very existence, and still failing to provide any interesting answers. The true motivation of Ultron remains whatever Stark guessed it was, as far as we're concerned, because as established, our Conqueror doesn't make an appearance. Yeah, a bunch of Ultron robots show up, but they're effectively drones if all of this is being controlled by Ultron from the future, so they don't count. I'm not really interested in some kind of robot apocalypse version of Waiting for Godot. I'm willing to meet the story partway on what it wants to be, but what it wants to be is a whole lot of masturbating until it becomes a time travel story. Give me the apocalypse if you want. Give me former heroes broken and defeated. Give me a world without hope. I'll take all that just fine, if it works for the story. But it doesn't work for the story here. I continue to have the same problem I mentioned in the first part. I oppose Ultron's plot only because I oppose the extermination of the human race on general principle. Bendis is so concerned with driving home the points that he wants that he's missed the need for context. Maybe I'm belaboring the point. I'm just flabbergasted that so much time and effort has been expended only for the story itself to be so mediocre that I prefer tie-ins to the actual story. Bad enough that Ultron doesn't appear in Age of Ultron, but then we have a book called just Ultron and he still doesn't show up. I'm just left with the opinion that the problem isn't with what's there, it's everything that's not there that's the problem. There's no compelling emotional and intellectual motivation for the reader until the idea comes along to travel back in time and address a pre-Ultron Hank Pym. What I want is to be engaged. I don't care if it's by being emotionally affected, or enlightened, or inspired, or even heartbroken. Just not bored. You've set it all up. Ultron wants heroes. You think you know why. Heroes show up in the future. Ultron overwhelms them. Except, none are spared to be dragged before Ultron, broken and defeated, to finally find out if Iron Man was right. Nothing about what Ultron is up to. Nothing about how he's controlling from the future, because that way he knows every move of his enemy before they make it. You have no surprises against me. This just kills them all and is done with it. The villain wins off-screen. They were so damn sure that it sounded good on paper that it was already assumed that this was going to be great. How do you fuck up the apocalypse? The answer is Age of Ultron. By assuming mere existence can substitute for storytelling, that more images of wreckage and death can substitute for emotions, that mature storytelling is death, tits, and foul language. It's not. It's having something to say and then saying that well. This is just more trash for the heap with fewer and fewer diamonds in sight.